episode 219 of Brutal Battle. Yes, like I said on the last episode, I'm already getting screwed up on this, and I haven't had any beer on this recording session. Well, this episode. Like I said on the last episode, I'm doing another solo, so it'll just be these two solo ones. But rest assured, I will be doing episodes with other people very soon. They're going to be some of the special episodes coming up right after this one. And then there's going to be the Decasode, and then I already have someone booked for the, I guess it would be episodes 221 and 222, maybe further out than that. I'm not sure. As you know, sometimes people are around for 2 episodes, sometimes up to 4 or 5. You never know. But rest assured, there will be more guests showing up. So, like I did with the last episode, I'm doing more beers for the mystery beers. I'm not going to do what I did with the last one because I did an entire pack of beer and that was 6. For this one, I am only doing 4, and this is not one of the ones that is themed. Like the last one was all beers from one brewery in one beer pack. These, I have no idea. It's just 4 beers. So most likely, the breweries do not overlap on this one. So, I'll tell you right now, I'm looking at it, and there's 1 light-colored beer, and there's 3 much darker beers. So I believe that what Rebecca's thrown at me this time is more for the season. So we'll see about that. All right, so the topic I want to talk about for this episode is actually kind of just looking at when I started drinking craft beer and versus now. Because when I started drinking craft beer was about 2006. And then here we are in 2018, the very end of 2018. So I've been drinking craft beer for 12 years now about? So in those 12 years, there have actually been a ton of changes in the craft beer industry, in the craft beer community. So I just kind of wanted to be able to talk about a comparison of this is kind of what was going on when I got into craft beer, and this is what's going on now that's severely different from when I got started. And I think it's good for things like this to just kind of look back here and there and understand how much ground has been covered. Because when you think about 12 years, sometimes it sounds like it's a lot of time. But if you really think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much time, really. So it's very interesting to do this kind of look back and be like, in just 12 years, all these things have changed. So I'm going to go over a little bit of that. Also, I just wanted to say real quick, the podcast starting in January, which this episode will be out before January, but not that much before. The podcast is about 6 years old in January of 2019. So I've been doing this podcast for a long time. So over this, I guess it's now been like half the amount of time that I've been drinking craft beers. I've been doing this podcast. And I started the podcast mainly because the craft beer community in Maryland was very small and very slow back when I started drinking craft beer. And when I started the podcast, it was still super slow. There still weren't that many people out there. So I didn't have a way to really talk to people about craft beer. So I did the podcast as a way for me to talk about craft beer and learn about craft beer and bring other people into the fold, get them excited about it in my area so that I would then have people to talk about with craft beer. So obviously that's happened, and, all the time I have guests on here who talk about craft beer, who I've introduced craft beer to, and they sound a lot more educated. They've learned a lot more, as have I. So if you actually go back and listen to the beginning of the podcast, it's pretty terrible. To be honest, it's embarrassing. I didn't know very much at all about craft beer. I just kind of jumped in, and 6 years later, I know way more about craft beer than I used to. And I think in general, people who got into craft beer over the years as they've still been into it, they just learn so much. I feel like with the craft beer industry, they want to educate their consumers a whole lot. And I feel like the craft beer community, as it's become very tight, they want to educate themselves too. And they also educate each other. And there's a funness, I guess I want to say, in having a lot of knowledge about what you're into as far as, tasting and smelling craft beers and feeling like you can fully appreciate them. So it's not just about the process, but it's about, knowing the breweries, knowing what styles and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, anyway, let me start talking because I don't want to make this like a super long episode. The last episode ended up being significantly longer than I expected it to, but I guess part of that was because I was doing 6 beers. So if you didn't listen to that, go back and listen to that. It was fun. So I just have some notes I put down on my iPhone that I had been thinking about as I was thinking about this episode. So back in 2006, when I started drinking craft beer, I looked this up online, and the average price for a 12-ounce bottle of craft beer was $3.31. Compare that to 2018 that I found online, and the average price for a 12-ounce bottle is $4.25. As people know, things only get more expensive in life. Thankfully, I'm making more money in 2018 than I was in 2006. Hopefully that's the case for everyone listening to this as well. If not, I'm sorry. That sucks. But yeah, so basically $1 per bottle increase within that 12-year span, which if you think about it could be a lot worse. The other thing is, back in 2006, there really weren't 22-ounce bottles or 750 milliliter bottles happening. So there really was no price comparison for that. So I will just tell you that nowadays the average on 22-ounce bottles is about $12, and the average on 750 milliliter bottles is about $17. So there you go. And yeah, actually on the topic of those 22s and 750 milliliters, they weren't really there in the beginning. I mean, there was a thing here or there, like a beer here or there that was in like a 22 ounce back in 2006, but it wasn't a big thing. Over time, it really became more popular, and then you're seeing a lot of 22 ounces, and now we're really in the decline of that, and people are really shying away from getting 22 ounce and 750 milliliters because it's a lot to commit to, and people just want smaller ones. And I think part of that arose from people being able to get mixed 6-packs more often, more consistently at liquor stores and groceries and things like that, depending on where you live. So I think people's interest in the 22 ounce and larger has just started to wane for that reason, because a lot of the things that they were putting in those larger formats ended up being barrel-aged beers, sour beers, hoppy beers, things like that you'd, in that format, more want to share with people. And it's just a big commitment. And the other thing is, if you only want to get like a 12 ounce because you just want to try it, it's a huge commitment to pay on average, $12 to $17 for a beer that you haven't had before, when instead you could pay $4.25 on average for a 12 ounce bottle, and it's way less of a commitment. So I think for those reasons, we're definitely moving away from those larger formats. And actually, while we're on the topic, Cans are a big thing that changed. Barely anyone was doing cans when I started, only the macros really back in 2006. And over that time, it's become very popular, obviously because of Oscar Blues really pushing it. And another place, 6 Point Brewery, they really started pushing it as well. So obviously that's a really good thing because you can't get beers that are light struck in that situation. And also you end up with less oxygen getting in typically, because with bottle caps, there's still room for seepage of oxygen to get in. With actual canning, the way the tops go on, there's a lot less of a chance of actual oxygen getting in and changing that beer. Also with being light struck, basically, no light is getting through a can, but those bottles, you're having light get through it. Yes, if they're brown bottles, it's significantly less than if it's like a green bottle or a clear bottle. But if it's no bottle at all and it's a can, then you're just not getting that light in there, which is always a plus. There are a bunch of other reasons for cans being really good and like being highly recyclable, and also you can ship the same amount of beer in cans as in bottles, and it will actually use less gas and cost less because it weighs less. It's weighing that truck down way less. So it's more economical, it's more environmentally friendly, and it's just better for the beer. So just throwing that out there. Oh, and actually now I feel like we're on the rise of the 16 ounce can really starting to take hold, because as soon as we got to 12-ounce cans, there were a few breweries that kind of tried to be like, oh, let's do some 16-ounce. And people really weren't going for it in the beginning, but now people really are starting to do it. And I'm seeing a lot more 16-ounce cans out there, which I'm all for, because there are plenty of times where I'm like, I don't just want 12 ounces of beer, but I don't want 24 ounces of beer. Somewhere in between would be great. So the 16 ounces are killer for that. All right, so the amount of craft breweries that there were in the United States in 2006, 1,409. Contrast that with 2017. Sorry, I couldn't get 2018 numbers because they were not official. I got them from the same place, and I just wanted to make sure, they were from the same place and reliable. I think I got them from the Brewers Alliance, or the Brewers Association. So 1,409 in 2006, and in 2017, at the end of that year, 6,372. That is a massive, massive jump. I mean, it's almost 5,000 breweries more in the United States in that amount of time. What's that, 11 years? That's crazy. I mean, good for us craft beer drinkers because of the choice that you have. But that's also, because of that, it's kind of changed the landscape on what is available. Back in 2006, you really couldn't get that many different craft breweries where you were, especially not here in Maryland. Distribution was super, super limited. I just remember mainly being able to get local stuff. Heavy Seas was one I remember a lot because they were out of Baltimore. Duclaw, obviously, because they were local as well. Places up in Pennsylvania like Victory, Weyerbacher, things like that. And then obviously the big boys like Boston, Samuel Adams and Sierra Nevada, just to, name a few. As time progressed after 2006, we started getting a lot more breweries showing up in the market, and selection really started to become way more robust, which was great for someone like me who just wanted to keep trying craft beer. Now we're at a point where there just isn't enough space on the shelves at liquor stores and beer stores and grocery stores, depending on where you live, once again. And that's becoming a bit of a problem, because where we were in 2006, it's like, man, I really wish I had a lot more selection because there's just these few craft beers available. There was plenty of space for them, and then over time started being more and more available for distribution, and now we're just at a point where you can't put everything that is available on that shelf for a few reasons. One, there are way more breweries that are expanding their distribution. Two, there are a lot more breweries in everyone's area that are popping up that can distribute. So it's not just breweries distributing from states away, it's local. And the other thing is that breweries are in this game where they have to keep presenting new beers and new styles to their customer base. So everyone's vying for the same space that was available basically in 2006, but there's so many more players 12 years later, and they're still fighting for that same amount of space, which, like I said, there was extra space back in 2006 for people to get in there, but now it's just not there. So really it's way more tight, and it's way more competitive than what it was. Good for the consumer in a sense, but at the same time, I liked it kind of more in the middle. Like when we got to a point where like, there is a nice selection here, but it's not crazy overwhelming. In 2018, at the very end, we are in a time where it's super overwhelming. You can spend a lot of time trying to figure out what mixed six-pack you want to get at a liquor store or beer store. It is crazy. And then there are things that are going to be at one store, and then you just go a few miles to another store, and there are different things there because they're choosing to carry something different. There's not a whole lot of consistency for that reason either. And it just becomes kind of tough. I mean, but it also kind of is like this is obviously super first world problems, because you're like, oh my God, there's just so many awesome beers. I can't drink them all, because I feel like that too. Anyway, moving on. Back in 2006, my taste was more towards things like wheat beers, amber beers, brown ales, stuff like that. Flash forward to 2018 right now, and I've gone through so many phases. Right now, I'm starting to lean more towards the lagers recently because I just want to have, something kind of easy but flavorful to sip on. The other thing is you can really appreciate it because brewers will tell you it's not that hard to make a good IPA because you can hop and hop and hop the beers, and you can mask a lot of imperfections in a beer by throwing in a lot of hops. With something like a lager, it's such a clean, stripped down beer that if there are imperfections, you're gonna see it, you're gonna smell it, you're gonna taste it. So for someone to do a lager versus someone doing something like an IPA, there's a lot more skill and finesse involved in making a lager, and I really appreciate that. Not that I haven't before, but it just hasn't been my taste many years ago. So yeah, so I went from like wheat ales and ambers and brown ales, and now I will drink pretty much anything, but I am starting to go more towards lagers. But like I said, I'll drink pretty much anything. I still love a nice barrel-aged beer. I still love a nice IPA. I still love a nice sour beer. I'm all over the map. Saisons, all that stuff. It's wonderful. So back in 2006, we didn't have anything like mixed six-packs. That is a awesome thing that occurred. You would have to buy an entire six-pack back in 2006. At that time, I was actually working at a liquor store, and what some of the other employees and I would do, who were all in the craft beer, is we would do our own kind of mixed six. All of us would we'd get 6 people together, either 4 or 6 people, depending on who wanted to get in on it, and everyone bought a six-pack, and then we would all mix up the beers. So we were doing our own mixed six-packs before they were actually a thing. Fast forward now, it's a very advantageous thing. That way, instead of having to commit to an entire six-pack to try a beer, you can just get that single bottle and, go in, walk out with one six-pack. You're going to try 6 beers for a pretty affordable price. Obviously, there's more of an upcharge to each of those single beers as opposed to if you would buy 6 of that individual beer. The price per bottle is a lot more for the mixed six-pack, but you pay for convenience, and that's kind of what that is. But I'm for it. I like it. Because there's nothing worse than when you buy a whole six-pack of something, you try it, and you're like, I don't like this. Because you got to find someone to give it away to, or you got to dump it. Or you have to just man up and power through it, which some people just do anyway. So, anyway. Yeah, another note I had on here is there were pretty much no breweries at that point in Maryland. I wouldn't say no, but the ones that really stick out in my mind is Oliver's was still around, but they're way different now than they were then. Pub Dog, which Pub Dog is mainly just doing contract brewing now. Obviously Duclaw, Heavy Seas, because I already talked about them within Maryland. But now there are a crazy amount of breweries. There's one called Sapwood Cellars that just opened up recently in Columbia, and people are going nuts over their beers right now. So, I can't keep up. I know I've said it on the podcast before, but I can't keep up. People tell me all the time, have you been to this brewery? Have you been to this? And I hadn't even heard of it, and I'll be like, where is it? Oh, it's in Maryland. And I'm like, there's so many breweries. And I'm sure other people are having that. But what's coming out of that is people are starting to drink more hyper-local. So you're keeping a lot more money in the local economy, which is actually a very nice thing for a local economy. Just think about it this way. If we were back in 2006 when people were just really trying to get things actually one of the big things people really wanted was Fat Tire from New Belgium. It wasn't in the market at that point. Ooh, excuse me, I knocked the table. It wasn't in the market at that point, but if it had been, a lot of people would have been purchasing this New Belgium Fat Tire, and that money, a lot of money would be siphoned out to Colorado to New Belgium. Now, with so many Maryland breweries, people are just like, well, I got this awesome brewery pretty close to me. I'm just going to go there and drink beers. And they take pride in the beers being local, not Natty Boh, because that's definitely not local people. But yeah, people take pride in that. They're like, this is my local brewery. It's close. It's good. And so the money stays here. It's people who live in the community who are brewing this beer and they own the company. So they're going to spend their money locally too. So the money just keeps circulating within the local economy, which is a very good thing. So going from that, bottom line, there are tons of breweries. There was no waiting in line for beers pretty much back in 2006. That was a nice thing. Now craft beer is way more popular, which is overall good, but it gets a little annoying here and there when you like go to a beer festival or you go to like a beer release and you have to wait in line. It's just kind of a pain. And that wasn't the case back in 2006. I mean, back in 2006, there weren't a whole lot of people or breweries doing special beer releases. So, yeah, that's just a big difference. There weren't a whole lot of beer events back then. And I feel like I keep hearing about more and more and more beer events that are popping up nowadays. And that's a great thing. I love that, people can all get together, geek out about good beer, and have a lot of breweries come to represent themselves, get their names out there, and people just have a good time. So that's a good positive. There were, in 2006, pretty much no barrel-aged beers, so life is kind of sad in that sense. Although, at that point, we didn't really know what we were missing. Bourbon County brand Stout by Goose Island was around at that point, but it was very, very limited. None of that was making its way, at least to where I was. So I didn't really know what barrel-aged beers were, except Duclaw. Duclaw, in a very limited amount, they were doing Retribution, their bourbon barrel-aged Imperial Stout. So Duclaw was actually pretty early with the barrel aging. They didn't do a ton of it, but Retribution was around for a bit. So just another thing to think of. People, if you got into the craft beer scene when there were barrel-aged beers and you love barrel-aged beers, you got to think about my situation and be like, wow, that poor guy. In 2006, he had no access to barrel-aged stuff. Because I do love a barrel-aged beer now. So I did want to say some of the most sought-after breweries, according to what I was able to find on the internet, some of the most sought-after breweries back in 2006 were Founders, Three Floyds, Stone, Victory, AleSmith, and Russian River. So you think about that, and some of these breweries, people are still really looking to get a hold of their stuff. Like Three Floyds, people are still really looking for Dark Lord, but the searching isn't as much. Founders, people are still really looking for like Canadian Breakfast Stout, CBS, and their KBS, Kentucky Breakfast Stout. But overall, it's way more accessible around the United States. So it's not that much of a sought-after brewery for that reason. Then you think about like Stone, Victory, AleSmith, like a lot of those, people don't even really talk about all that much anymore. So, because they're not like the hot thing. So fast forward to now, some of the more popular breweries right now are like Treehouse, Bissell Brothers, Trillium, Monkish, Side Project, things like that. So a lot of it has to do with the hazy IPA craze. So that's why a lot of those are hazy IPA breweries, basically. So let me see if I made any notes on anything in particular I need to talk about. You can purchase beers online now. That's if the laws are right in your state, which Maryland they are, and I think that just changed 2015, 16 is when it was allowed for people to order beer online from a licensed seller. For the longest time, you could order wine online for a long time, and it was like, why can you not do this for beer? So eventually Maryland got caught up. I know there are a lot of states that aren't caught up at this point with that, and that's sad because there are some really great websites from which you can buy beer. Ones that I have used, and I can definitely recommend the Beer Temple out of Chicago, Illinois. They do really good stuff. They have a really good selection. It's very local to Chicago, so I would go with that. Also, Craft Beer Kings out of California, and they have a really good selection of stuff. Every now and then they get some really rare stuff like variants of Bourbon County. They end up with some Cantillon beers here and there. Just really more obscure and rare stuff they'll get here and there. Hard to get, and they limit it to one, but, there's a lot of good stuff. So if you can, ordering from those two places is really awesome because two different markets, they're pulling a lot of different stuff. So, just saying. But being able to order beer online, excellent. Beer societies, that's another thing that came up. There was no such thing as a beer society back in 2006. Now there are breweries that are doing it like Springhouse. I was involved in that one. The new brewery that just popped up, Sapwood Cellars down in Columbia, Maryland. I know before they even opened, they started selling like society memberships, which in my opinion is smart because you get all that money up front to do the beers you want to do. But the brewery out of Placentia, California, was a brewery that really kind of pioneered the society. And Patrick Rue, the CEO of that and founder of that company, really had a lot of forethought in putting something like that together. And I think because he did it in such a good way and people really were excited about it and still are excited about it. I'm actually enrolled in the brewery's Reserve Society. I think because of that, a lot of other breweries kind of took note and said, hey, we can do this too. And that's guaranteed money for us. So we can kind of do the pilot beers that we really want to be able to do. And then they can take those pilot beers, they can really hone them with their society members. And then if they end up being able to scale it up enough that they can make a lot, they can also start releasing a little bit of it here and there to the public. So it's just a good thing overall for the drinkers and for the producers. I talked about the huge increase in distribution. There's just a crazy amount of choices at this point. And then there's been a huge attention shift. Back when I started in 2006, a lot of attention started being paid to the West Coast because of the West Coast IPA that showed up that was very citrusy, tropically, and had a lot of bitterness to it. Well, now it's swinging back to the East Coast. Where we are right now, it's all about hazy IPAs, which are considered to be New England-style IPAs. So the East Coast is now in the spotlight for a different type of IPA, which focuses on even more citrus flavor, typically. Sometimes a little pine in there, some other stuff, but it's more about tropicality and citrus and almost no bitterness to it and a little bit extra mouthfeel to it. So, and also at that point, West Coast IPAs and IPAs in general were about being clear and totally filtered. And it was actually considered to be embarrassing if you were putting out a beer that was cloudy. That's why when the Alchemist showed up and they were doing Heady Topper, it said on the can, drink from the can. They didn't want you to put it in a glass because according to a lot of brewers, your beer should be clear. That's just the way it should be. But over time, we've gotten over that now, and there literally are people who will go into bars, go into liquor stores and say, I want your haziest beer, which actually doesn't mean anything as far as flavor. It's just kind of a correlation with that's what people think of the, quote, hazy IPAs. You need to know the individual beer to really know if hazy means anything for that beer. Because there are beers that are hazy, and it doesn't mean anything with the flavor necessarily. Craft brewery sellouts. That is something over time that started up that is not a good thing. You know, obviously it started with the big one, Goose Island, that was bought by AB InBev. You know, Wicked Weed was picked up at some point. Breckenridge, Blue Point, Elysian, 10 Barrel, Golden Road, you know, bunches of breweries. Ballast Point was bought up by another big company. You know, you had Firestone Walker, Ommegang. They got Boulevard. They all got picked up by Duvel. You know, a bunch of this type of stuff happening. The breweries, I think, sold... Did they totally sell out? I can't remember. They may have totally sold out to a investment company, not another beer producing company, but an investment company. Founders, they sold like 50% of their company to a like Spanish distribution company or something. I might not be 100% right on that, but I think that's what I remember. But anyway, all these sellouts. In certain instances where breweries are relinquishing some of the control for capital, like with the brewery or with Founders, they're getting an infusion of money, which is actually kind of a good thing as far as, you know, expansion of distribution, expansion of their capabilities, how much more they can brew. You know, they can take more chances. They can, you know, maybe lower their prices in certain instances. So that's kind of a good thing. But at the same time, when you have buyouts like Goose Island, like Wicked Weed, things like that, that's, you know, someone like AB InBev coming in and they're trying to find out how they can do damage to the craft breweries. And in certain instances, there have been allegations that AB InBev through Goose Island has been trying to price the beers too low for craft breweries to really make a profit in order to compete. And so they're trying to kind of force people out. So that's why I say that the buyouts have been kind of a bad thing. But, you know, think whatever you want. There are some pluses to it. And then craft beer tourism. Craft beer tourism has become way more of a thing over time. I mean, literally, there are people who plan their vacations now around what craft breweries they can go to. Rebecca and I do that from time to time. Actually, kind of a little bit more than from time to time, we'll go and just be like, all right, we are thinking about going to the state. What breweries are there? I email ahead and say, hey, I'm with this podcast. Want to come check it out? So we always have a list of breweries we want to check out. So that's an awesome thing, because as the craft beer community has blown up, people are able to, and when I say people, I mean breweries are able to pull a lot of people specifically into their towns to spend money there, not just at the breweries, but at restaurants, hotels, stuff like that, to pull in more capital. And it becomes a draw, and it can be a huge cash cow for towns, cities, states, counties, whatever. So a lot of positive going on there. So yeah. And that's actually my last bit. I actually ended up talking way longer than I thought I would. I had all those bullet points, and I thought, I'll go through those kind of fast, but I didn't. I think what I'm finding out is I feel like I can't talk at length by myself, and then I just do it. So I'm way more of a talker than I thought. Anyway, all that done, people, if you have your 2 cents that you want to throw in on this, just send me an email, brutalbattlepodcast@gmail.com. So yeah. The 4 beers for the mystery beers, I'm getting right to it. The first one looks like potentially a hazy pale ale, IPA, something like that. Or it could be just like an unfiltered wheat. Kind of looks like maybe like Allagash White. Just because it's kind of fresh in my mind since we came back from Portland, Maine not long ago. It smells... Clear my nose out a little bit. There's some citrus there. Okay, so it smells Belgian-y. There's a little lemon hit, a little bit of lemon peel with some bitterness to it, a little bit of like a coriander type smell, and a Belgian yeast note with some slight banana on top of that Belgian yeast note. It smells relatively light, although actually the citrus, like that lemony and lemon peel, seems like it's stronger than you would normally think with like a weedy type Belgian beer like this. Which, I'm assuming on the smell that's what it is. But it smells pretty good. It smells like it's going to have a pretty clean finish. I'm going in for a sip. Bear with me when I take my tastes, because since there's not another person to talk, there's going to be a little bit more dead air. Okay. Definitely tastes like a Belgian style wheat beer. Definitely get that kind of like Belgian yeast flavor that comes off being slightly medicinal, not a whole lot. And that's fine. It's got a kind of a little bit of a watery finish on the end with a little bit of bitterness lingering. I definitely get that kind of lemon and lemon peel up front, and a little bit of that like coriander flavor in the middle. The banana, I don't really get a ton of the banana. So, you know me, I'm not like huge on Belgian style beers typically, and it's the yeast. The yeast kind of imparts stuff that I'm not into. Like that little medicinal note, I'm not a fan typically. Banana, typically not into. There's not a whole lot of a banana flavor in that, so that's not really bothering me. But it's not too offensive. It's not too crazy and pronounced in the areas that I typically don't like. So for that reason, this is not really bad. It's starting to come off as being a slightly more effervescent in the finish than you would assume a beer would be. So a little higher carbonation level. Not that that's bad, it's just a, mouthfeel difference. Okay, I'm trying to think, should I just rate this beer now? Because there are 4 beers. Yeah, I should probably just rate this beer right now. Okay, this one is... it's not bad. I don't love it, but I don't dislike it. I think it's relatively solid. So for that reason, I got to go ahead and throw a 3 on that beer, which people who have been listening to this podcast know that is a decent rating. 3 that's a solid beer. So I'm going with that. Drink a little water before moving on to B. So A has a 3. B looks like, it looks like a little reddish brownish. There's like no carbonation. It looks totally flat. There's some stuff kind of floating in the bottom of it, which makes me think it's kind of like a sour beer, maybe like an Oud Brune or something like that. Yeah, I can see through. I can see through it a little bit. It's not like super dark. Ooh, what is that smell? It smells really woody. What is this? I smell like wood and, like wood and brown sugar and booze. It's definitely got a real present booziness on the nose. It's like wood, booze, like almost like the booze is almost coming off kind of like rubbing alcohol, which would indicate to me that this beer may be aged. Definitely woody though. Wood, alcohol, brown sugar. I feel like there's like one other thing in there. Slightly cherry, maybe? Like a little bit of a cherry something or other. Yeah, but as I keep sniffing it, I keep getting more and more and more of that astringency that's kind of like a rubbing alcohol. It becomes more prevalent and it starts to kind of overpower more of the smells. Okay, I'm going to go in and try this. Doesn't smell sour. What is this? What is this? It's, it definitely tastes very woody. There's a little bit of like a roasty finish on the end that's a tad bit coffee-like. And actually, as I just let it continue to sit in my mouth, it starts tasting even more like residual, kind of like dark roasted coffee. Thinner on the mouthfeel than I thought it would be, based off like the smell of alcohol. I definitely taste that alcohol, but it's not as out of kilter in the flavor as it is in the nose. I can get a little bit of that brown sugar. It's coming off like extremely oaky, like very, very woody to me, which I like. I actually like that. The little bit of like that woody oakiness and that roasty coffee that I was describing, those two things kind of like coming together and mixing in each sip is kind of nice. The astringency is a little rough, but I'm assuming that has to do with some aging of this beer. It tastes like it's been aged, and I would think that then, for that reason, Rebecca kind of pulled this somewhere from my stash. It's relatively thin, but I like it. There's a little bit of a fruitiness in there. I'm trying to decide, is it like the fruitiness is maybe like a low-grade plum flavor. So it's kind of like brown sugar, plum, coffee, oak. But that plum is like super, super subdued. You have to really reach for that one. Okay. I like it. Oh, man. This is a tough one to put a number on. Because I do like it, but that astringency is kind of becoming a little problematic. It's not that bad. Out of kilter. I don't know. Okay, so I'm between a 3 and a 4. I'll just kind of talk that out. I'm between a 3 and a 4, and see, this is where I'd be able to have an internal dialogue with myself about where I'm going between the 3 and a 4. But since there isn't anyone else on the podcast, I kind of have to do it out loud. So I'm between a 3 and a 4. Do I like it more than I think I do, because I feel like there's a little bit more going on. So I am going to give it a 4. I really think, like I've already said, I'm sorry to just beat this to death, I think it's been aged. It has to be. It's just got that kind of flavor. I'll be very surprised if that's not the case, but we'll see what that is. That's pretty good. I like it. I do like it. At first, I was kind of like off put off because it's definitely thinner than I thought it would be, and that alcohol. But as you continue to sip it, the flavors just integrate better. Like I was saying, the coffee and the oak. It's nice. I like that. So that's a 4. So beer C. This one looks very dark. And actually the last 2 beers are pretty dark. And they look the same. I cannot discern anything like very dark. Can't see through them. Like a little bit of brown around the edges. Yeah, they look pretty much the same. Okay, so beer C. Ooh, it smells hoppy. What does it smell? Ooh, okay. It's very, very roasty on the nose, but it's also very, very hoppy. It's got like this quick citrus hop hit up front, and that's actually the first thing that kind of smashes into my nose. It's kind of almost like alarming, especially because when you're going in to sniff something like this, you're just expecting a lot more of a maltiness to be present in it and not hoppiness like that. So that citrus hoppiness is what you get up front. And then once you get past that, you're getting more of that kind of like roasty maltiness, a little bit of like a chocolate. I'm trying to see, molasses, and a little bit of like a smoky ashiness in there as well. It's a pretty complex nose. I'm used to smelling beers that look like this, that have the exact same aroma minus that hoppy citrus note. And I really think that addition of that hoppy citrus note really does a lot for the aroma. I like that a lot. That's really cool. This does remind me of a beer that I've had. It's been a while since I've had this beer. It's been at least 2 years since I've had this beer before. But I have always known of one brewery that does a pretty friggin' hoppy stout, and that is Victory. Victory Brewing, they do Storm King, which I think is actually their Imperial Stout, and that's always been relatively hoppy, and it has that characteristic, like a citrusy hoppiness on it. So I'm going to go in and taste this, see if it tastes like that. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. This beer tastes the way it smells pretty much. You get that hit of citrusy hoppiness up front. There's a pretty present bitterness that goes along with it, but then it goes right into like a dark chocolate with the bitterness from a dark chocolate carrying through. To be clear, this beer is pretty bitter, and more bitter than you would assume for a dark beer like this. I do get that ashiness on the finish as well. Roasty, ashy. Ooh. Yeah, that hoppiness throughout, like all the way through, that's just really nice. Now, this is a beer that people might really have to warm up to because, like I was talking about with the trends of people kind of going towards less bitterness in beer, especially with, the hazy IPA trend. If someone goes to a stout like this or an Imperial Stout like this and they get that big hop hit, they're going to be happy with the citrus playing in there, but they're not going to be happy with all that bitterness. I like it though. It's a blast from the past, so to speak, and I'm digging it. That folds into all those other flavors really well. I like that. And it's actually is coming off a little bit kind of woody at the end as well. Ooh, this is, I like that a lot. I don't really give super high numbers typically, but, well, and some people wouldn't say it's super high, but I'm putting a 6 on that beer. That beer is nice. Wow, a 6 on that beer. I like that beer quite a bit. A lot of nice flavors coming together there. All right, definitely got to cleanse my palate for the next one. Well, the last one. So whatever beer C is, it's going to make it onto the website, the front page of the website, where there's a list on the right-hand side of the top beers that have been on the podcast over the past 6 years. All right, so D, like I said, is, it just looks like a stout. It looks a lot like C. Ooh, man. tons and tons and tons of coffee when I smell it. My initial smell is just like crazy, ridiculous amounts of coffee. Wow. Ooh, it's like a beautiful coffee smell. Gorgeous. And it smells like it's a mix of like really nicely roasted coffee and also green, young coffee at the same time. I don't feel like I can smell anything else. It's just like domination of coffee. Just like a coffee stout. Coffee stout, coffee porter. Man, it's just coffee, 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 coffee. It smells like a medium to dark or somewhere in between roast. Yeah, but it's just, I cannot smell anything other than that freaking coffee. But what's so interesting is what I said is that it smells like it's this mix of like really well roasted coffee versus green. All right, I'm going to try it. Guess what? Tastes a lot of coffee. Man, it almost is like drinking black coffee. It's kind of crazy. It's just a lot of coffee up front. There's a decent bitterness coming in the middle, and then it kind of like fades at the end, and it's a little thinner than I feel like I would want for a beer that has that much coffee. But it's good. It is good. Comes off with a little bit of like an acridity from the coffee up front. So I'm assuming that this was not done with cold brewed coffee. I think it was hot brewed and then added to the beer. Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like, it's hard to discern this as a beer in a sense because there is so much coffee to it. You literally could hand this to someone and just tell them it's like alcoholic coffee. Or some people might not even pick up that there's alcohol in it because I really can't perceive alcohol. Maybe part of that's because of the other beers I drank, but it's like coffee. It's coffee, coffee, coffee. Okay, so I like it because I like coffee, but I also don't feel like it's offering a ton. Like with a beer like that, I want some other notes in there. Maybe like some vanilla would be nice. Maybe some like chocolate to it. Because I don't really get chocolate. If there is a chocolate in there, it's being very well hidden by the coffee. So it's not really what you want to do. I like it, but trying to figure out where this needs to go. I'm tasting B to see in comparison where I think it should go. I gotta go. The coffee's good. I don't know, but it's just coffee. I gotta go 3. I'm sorry. Like, I really like coffee, but it's just coffee. Like, there are no other notes really in that beer. It's just coffee. So, all right. Anyway. So, to recap, beer A got a 3, beer B got a 4, beer C got a 6, and beer D got a 3. So let's go ahead and do, well, since we just finished with it, I'll just do beer D right now. Beer D overall 3 is, oh, okay. Well, it's a coffee stout, so I was right on that. It is Drip Drop Coffee Stout by Otter Creek Brewing. And Otter Creek Brewing is out of Vermont. Let me see specifically. Middlebury, Vermont. And this beer is 5.6% alcohol. I had heard that this was a pretty solid beer, but, I'm just not feeling it that much just because it's like I said, it's just like, it's coffee. It's like just coffee. I need something else out of this beer. Okay. Not bad, though. Like I said, I like the coffee in it. It's just, it's just coffee. All right, so let's unveil A. A, also with an overall of 3, this is the one that I thought was Belgian. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, I was wrong about Belgian. It's German influenced. Unless they say somewhere on here that they use Belgian yeast. I don't know. But it's by RAR Brewing out of Cambridge, Maryland, and it is their Groove City Hefeweizen, and it's unfiltered Hefeweizen. 5.2% alcohol by volume. And yeah, I was trying to see if there was like any other things written on here that might give me some extra info. No, but that's a solid beer. I've had it before. Actually, I think it's been on the podcast before, but it's been some years, and I remember enjoying it then, and I enjoy it now. It's not bad. It's pretty solid. Okay, let's go ahead and reveal what beer B was. This is one that I was like, this is kind of weird, but there's a lot of flavors, and I feel like it's aged. All right, beer B, overall 4. Is this aged? Or is this... I don't think they date code. Okay, so this is Weyerbacher. Weyerbacher Brewing out of somewhere in Pennsylvania. Oh, Easton, Pennsylvania. And this is their Slam Dunkel, which is a double Dunkelweizen ale. It is 7% alcohol. I wonder if this one is one that's been in my basement for a long time. I'm going to assume that that's probably the case, because I know I had a Slam Dunkel just like sitting in my basement literally for years. And if that's the case, if that's what this one is, then that held up actually pretty well. Like I said, I felt like it was aged, but there's still some really nice notes in there. Dunkelweizen. Okay, I can see that now. I can see the wheat notes in there. That's interesting. It still tastes good. I like that. Huh. Really, really very interesting. That's really interesting. Okay, and then the last beer, the winner of this episode, and one of the best beers that's been on the show, so it'll go on the website. Overall of 6, beer C is exactly what I thought it was. It is Victory Brewing Storm King Imperial Stout. This is a very good stout. I quite enjoy this. Victory is out of Downingtown, Pennsylvania, and this beer is 9.1% alcohol. Does it taste like that? I don't really think it tastes like 9%. And I think part of that has to do with the bitterness that's in there. It says a thundering hop presence collides with massive espresso and dark chocolate notes in this robust and full-bodied Imperial Stout. Agreed. Yeah. And this one isn't aged or anything. It's a pretty fresh one, apparently. Victory doesn't do like bottled on. They do enjoy by. So this one, it says enjoy by August 2nd of 2023. So I think we're well within that. Anyway, that was interesting. Yeah, and that's a good cross section. Well, not cross section, but that's a good variety of beers, I think, for this. So Rebecca, you did a good job. Rebecca, if you can hear me, you did a nice job, and I appreciate that. I do want to find out if that Slam Dunkel is aged, though, for sure. I don't know. Maybe I'll update that on another episode. But everyone, thank you for checking this out. I have gone way longer than I thought I would, so apologies for that. Hopefully people got stuff out of this. Like I said, if you want to add in your 2 cents about what I was talking about in the beginning of this episode, email brewbattlepodcast@gmail.com. And until next time, keep it brutal.
This has been a Nerd Circle podcast production.